Okay, and Dean brought up a good point that the color on this is a little bit off, and you'll see that on a lot of photos. And I think that the sunlight coming through the wax kind of gives it a yellow tint, or the foundation, especially my yellow frames, give it a yellow tint. When you're out there and your eye is looking at it, it won't fool you. But when you take a picture of it, it's like it'll look yellow. But European foul brood has a yellow tint to the brood, and that's something that we look for. So it's a little bit tricky looking at pictures and being able to tell that's just a color cast. That's not yellow brood. But, okay, anybody want to guess? So there's some of the yellow that we look for, and there's some more. And these larvae are twisted in kind of an unusual way. So that is European foul brood, so that's abnormal. You also will look at the cappings. These don't really have the telltale signs yet, but that's another thing to look for, is at the cappings to see if they're sunken. Okay, you want to guess on that one? So this is a normal frame. And the text on this is trying to indicate where you pay attention when you pull a frame out. So down here you've got capped brood. Up here you've got capped honey. And that interface in between the capped honey and the capped brood, that's where you're going to find larvae, and then work your way out to eggs. So the queen kind of starts in the center of the frame, and she lays kind of out in a spiral. And she does it on all of the frames. And so you'll see that pattern of the older brood in the center and the younger brood and the eggs out towards the outer edge. Normal or abnormal?
Abnormal.
Good. So that one is chalk brood. And I was about to guess it was European foul brood. So they're hard to tell the difference a lot of times. See how the larva is kind of melting down into the cells? That's one of the things that you look for. They don't normally do that, or you don't usually see them at this stage that big. They would normally be capped when they're that big.
You haven't done anything to that capping. It's not there. It's not like it had. It wasn't created. It's not like you removed it or something, correct?
Right. So the
Okay.
beekeeper did not remove that capping.
Okay.
Either the bees removed it, or you're right, it never existed in the first place.
Okay.
One of the two. You're right. Yeah, that's not something we pulled out to look at.
So essentially, these pictures are, you pulled out the frame, you took a picture of it. You haven't made any modifications or anything.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Just pictures, just as is. Yep. So how about that frame? That's a really nice frame of brood. I mean, see how it's brood from edge to edge. There's not even any honey or nectar or pollen. So when we pull a frame out like this, we're excited. This is a good laying queen. This hive is doing good. And also to note, there are some cells where there aren't any bees, these little openings. And this one may have a few more than average, but it's not something to be concerned about. And there's always going to be some. And a lot of times we think that they leave some openings on purpose, so a bee can go into that empty cell and generate heat and warm the brood nest, especially when it's colder.
So how many more bees are you going to have in your hive in a week from a frame like that? Because there's that many on the other side of the frame.
Both sides. So the rule of thumb is, well, first let me back up. How many days are they capped? They're an egg for 3 days. They're a larva for 6 days. 12. They're capped for 12 days. So within 12 days, all of these bees are going to hatch. And one frame of bees, once it's hatched, will cover 3 frames. So it's kind of exponential, or a snowball effect when they start taking off. Unless, Dean, you actually know the number of cells on a frame.
No, but I'm just thinking, you got one frame like that, you got 10 frames in your box or 20 frames. might have 3 or 4 frames like that.
Yep.
Hopefully.
Yep.
So you're, as we say, to get an extra box on your hive because they're gonna get crowded. Get frames like that, it can happen.
Yeah, like we recommend, when the box is 70 or 80% full, it's time to put another box on. Well, if it's 70% full and they're all capped brood like that, one box might not be enough. If all 7 of those turn into 3 more, I can't do math very well in my head, but that's over 20, isn't it? So that's a lot. That's something to think about when you're.
Are you calling it, what are you saying when they like open or hatch? What did you?
When they emerge.
Emerge, okay. Is it, I guess you make it sound like that all emerge at the same time.
They don't,
That's what I'm
No.
thinking, yeah.
but within 12 days of
They
being
will.
capped, yeah.
Because they're all filled like one, and then,
The queen
Oh,
starts in the center
yeah.
and she kind of spirals her way out,
Mhm.
but she must be laying full bore for this whole frame to be capped all at the same
And
time.
that
Okay.
might be 2 or 3 days of laying.
Okay.
too.
2 or 3 days,
Mhm.
yeah.
So they won't all pop out at the same hour or something.
Mhm, yeah,
It will be over a day or 2 probably.
Yeah.
okay.
And then a few more days for them to get cleaned out and start maybe laying in there again.
I think as soon as a bee emerges, another bee starts cleaning that cell out. So, yeah, I don't think it takes very long at all to get a cell cleaned out.
So over time, that peppered pattern, I suppose, changes.
It does, yeah, and hopefully we'll get to some of those pictures later, because then you'll start seeing this whole center is open and the outside's still capped. Or then there's eggs in the very center and like a bullseye, then there's larvae are opening on the outside. Yeah, it does kind of hard to explain, but you're on the right track.
The likelihood of you seeing a frame like that is 0.
That was pretty incredible.
Pretty dense. And if you notice, there's no honey on the edges either.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's likely coming from a commercial beekeeper.
You said that was good, or that it was nice.
Yes.
Why is that nice that there's no honey?
So in order for a queen to lay that much and for the bees to feed that many larvae to get them to this stage, it's got to be a good, healthy hive. Lots of resources or lots of stuff coming in. Yeah. If you had just a few frames of bees and they were struggling, they would not produce this. It just isn't possible for them unless they're doing really well. Normal or abnormal? Kind of depends. So that's a mature queen cell. So yeah, if you forgot to put a honey super on and they're running out of room, I guess it's normal because of the circumstances. You don't really want them to swarm, but that's what's gonna happen. Or if you made a split, then this is normal because you wanted them to raise a queen. But it's not normally what you find in the hive when you're looking at it, but under certain circumstances, you're going to find some queen cells. Okay, anybody? First of all, what do you notice about it? There you go. Yep. So these over here, see how they're bigger?
Yeah.
Here's capped brood, and it's all uniform and even, and all of a sudden, see how these are taller? They look kind of like bullets, like a bullet on the end of the cells. So those are drone cells. And that's another one where it's not exactly abnormal. You don't see a whole lot of this, but it's something you'll find occasionally. If you find a whole frame like this, that's abnormal. This is a little more than normal, but not enough to be concerned about. Okay, Kyle, any idea?
Normal?
Yep. And again, it's got that yellow cast to it because of the foundation or the wax or something. But yeah, I mean, these are capped brood over here, and they're normally not that bright a yellow. There's some big larvae there that are about to get capped. And see how they're still in that C shape? They're not pooling down at the bottom of the cell like some of those abnormal ones we saw. And then notice that the further you go out this direction, the younger the larvae get. Until you get out here, it's kind of hard to see, but there are eggs out here. eggs down here, younger larva, older larva. So as you get closer to the center, the older they are. Adam, any idea?
I'm gonna say normal.
Okay. So that one is abnormal.
Okay,
It's a little bit spotty brood pattern. So you remember that full frame that we saw, and there were a few openings here and there, and I said, that's okay. These are more than a few openings. And they're openings with some larvae down in there. So this is something that would warrant a closer look. And I don't know exactly what's going on here, which brood disease it is, but there's something not normal going on there.
So what do you start to check for? Like, it's not mites or, you know?
Yeah, it's a tough one to answer. First thing would be to get a closer look at some of the larvae and see if it's like foul brood. The next thing maybe would be to see like how extent, how big the problem is. Is it just one frame? Is it just a few cells, or is it several frames? If it's several frames, then you might have to end up using some antibiotics or something to treat it. There are tests that you can get to test for European foul brood, American foul brood, and I don't have any pictures of that. I'll have to get some. But American foul brood, you can take a matchstick or a toothpick and stir up some of the cells, and when you pull it out, the gummy substance, the dead bee will string out 1.5 inches, 2 inches. They call it ropey, the ropey test. When you pull that toothpick away, that goo will stretch out. Whereas the rest of them, it might stretch out just a little bit out of the cell, but it's not ropey like American foul brood. American foul brood is the nasty one where you pretty much want to burn your hive so that it doesn't spread to other hives. European foul brood you can treat with antibiotics. And if it's just, like I have it happen occasionally, I'll find a little spot of European foul brood on one frame, both sides of one frame or a couple of frames. It's not all over. And if forage conditions improve, it just goes away. Sometimes it shows up when it's been raining in the spring. They haven't been able to get proper nutrition, and it warms up and things go back to normal and it goes away.
Is it like a bacteria or is it?
Yeah, I'm not the right one to ask that question. I believe it is a bacteria. American foul brood is kind of a weird one because it's a bacteria, but it has a spore stage. That's one of the reasons why it's so nasty is the spores will get into the wood and the wax and they survive just short of forever. European foul brood, I think that it somehow or another survives in equipment, but it just doesn't get bad unless nutrition is depleted and the bees get stressed.
so what you were looking at to say that it's an abnormal spotty pattern is that larvae in there should have been covered by, or should have been capped, correct?
Yeah, like when they get to be this size and they're not capped, that's unusual.
Okay,
That and the fact that, a lot of them that you can see in there, they're not in that C shape. They're
Okay.
bigger than that. They're kind of elongated out and they're not capped yet. So yeah, you're headed on the right track. Yeah.
And the worker bees can detect all of that kind of stuff. As long as the larva is healthy, they're gonna do what they need to. When it's unhealthy, then they might cannibalize it, they might drag it out, they might leave it. So you could see it and stuff too.
so you call this a spotty pattern.
Mm-hmm.
Is that kind of like a, your eye gets to notice it over time?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like you're looking for a specific number of uncapped cells or something, right?
Yeah, it's just kind
It's
of
just kind
something
of
that,
recognizing the look.
yeah, you'll
Okay.
you'll start to learn the pattern.
I mean, what I really wanted to ask you was how many of those cells makes it a spotty?
Sure.
And I know you can't give me that answer. but-
Yeah, it's hard to give you an exact answer.
It looks like 10, 15, 20% of it there.
Okay,
The factor would be whether or not there's brood in the cell.
Mhm.
Oh, okay, okay.
That's what the giveaway here is. It's
That's a good
full-size
point.
cell, and there are larvae in there that are not alive.
So a lot of times, to clarify, when we say a spotty brood pattern, those cells don't have anything in them. And a spotty brood pattern is an indication of something wrong with the queen. She's run out of sperm, she's not laying properly, or she got injured.
That's exactly where I was going with it.
Yeah, and so this is a spotty brood pattern, but it's because there are diseased larvae in those uncapped
Okay.
cells. So thank you, Dave. That's a
The
good
spotty
point.
brood pattern is another thing to be aware of. That pattern without all of those carcasses in there, that's an indication, John just said, there's this problem with the queen not filling those back up with eggs right away.
Yeah, that's a
You
queen
start looking for
problem.
the queen as soon as, if you saw that without bodies in there and the other bees are just milling around and just not being real active, you better start looking for that queen and find out what's going on, because it shouldn't be like that. It should be like that.
Is it Rick?
Yeah.
Have I got that right? Okay, so Rick, what do you think on that one?
Looks normal.
Okay.
Just larger ones.
So yeah, this is a foundationless frame. So there's no center, there's no guide. The bees drew what they wanted, and they drew a lot of drone comb over here and worker comb over here. And so yeah, there's a lot of drones in there. Not normally what you'll see in your hive, but there's a reason for the abnormality here. Amy, you want to guess?
Abnormal.
There you go. So that's European foul brood. And I mentioned on one of the other European foul broods that when you looked at the cappings, they didn't have too many signs. These do. See how these are sunken? See how they already, you're nodding your head, they look a little different than some of the other cappings pictures, right? And then this one is really ugly brown. That one's a yellowy brown, and they're in the wrong shape. This is a pretty progressed. I would be concerned if I saw this much this far along. That's probably not going to
I'd
clear
be
up.
calling somebody if I saw that.
Yeah, that's not going to clear up when weather gets better. This is one you probably want to
Don't
treat.
call us.
Gee, right away.
All right, anybody want to guess? Abnormal. Yep. European foul brood again. This probably is a sign too. Look how there's eggs right alongside of bigger larvae. I guess I haven't really seen anything that says that's a sign, but that's not something you would normally see. That many eggs right in with that many adult larvae. And then these are not in a normal position. These are. That one is anyway. That one actually looks okay. But yeah, there's definitely some signs there of European foul brood.
The other deception here is that in all of these slides, the bees have been shaken off the
Yeah.
frames. Usually they're covered with bees and they're in the way all the time.
Yeah. So sometimes you might see just a few cells and think something doesn't look right there, and you need to maybe brush the bees off or move the bees off so you can actually see. And I was really reluctant my first couple of years of beekeeping. I didn't want to disturb them that much. And it took me a while to learn. There are times when you need to move them, and it doesn't disturb them as much as you think it will. But yeah, you do need to do that so you can see these things. Adam, got a guess on that one?
Say abnormal.
Yep. So that's European foul brood again. Quite a few of the yellow, not white looking. There's one sunken capping, maybe a few more, but a lot of the off colored larvae in that. This is an easy one. That's normal. And that's another really full, really nice piece of capped brood. And this one does have some honey going across the top, so it's not wall to wall, but it's pretty close.
That's also not classified as a shotgun pattern on the
Yeah,
spotty pattern.
yeah. So there aren't any larvae in there, and that's not it's not enough open cells to be concerned, not even close. The other thing I wanted to point out on this one, can you tell the color on the cappings is, I don't know, a little lighter, a little different? I think this is a fairly recently drawn out frame. And they get darker as they go, and that tends to bleed into the cappings. So this is a fairly recently drawn frame. Sorry. Kyle, I think your turn if you want to venture a guess.
I'm gonna say normal.
Yep. See how healthy they are? I mean, how much royal jelly is in the bottom of those cells? I mean, that hive's doing really well to have enough resources and bees to put that much royal jelly on each larva. And they're white and shiny and bright white. So this is a pretty obvious one too, right? It's a queen cell. And again, it's capped and about ready to emerge.
So if you would happen to have more boxes and you'd want to split them, would it be safe to take the frame out of with that queen cell?
Yeah.
And do it?
Yeah, so if you get into a hive and it's got a queen cell like this, that swarm impulse has already run almost all the way. I mean, it's possible you could find this and they have already swarmed. So either way, if you get in there and you find a capped queen cell, you're not going to slow down that swarm impulse by destroying the cells. Some of the books might tell you to go all the way through the hive and destroy all of them. In my opinion, they'll just raise another one. Or they may have already swarmed and you just killed all of the new queens.
Oh,
And more than likely, there will be just one swarm cell like that in there. You know, there'll be multiple frames that might have one or two on it.
Yeah, yeah. So if you come into this situation and you have equipment and you want some more hives, I would recommend that you take at least 1 or 2 frames with the capped queen cell on it and put it in that new hive. Then you'd have to go through all of the others and destroy them. Maybe find a queen in the original hive so you make sure the original hive still has a queen. You've taken 2 frames out. Now maybe find some frames of honey and bees. So your original hive loses quite a few bees, quite a few frames. You put foundation back in there to give them more space, make sure they've got a queen. So they're going to be okay. And that probably will stop the swarm impulse. It's not guaranteed, so you want to check them again. And then, yeah, you've moved a few queen cells and quite a few bees into a new box, and that queen can go out and get mated and you can start a new hive. If you really want to increase your odds and you've got enough bees, like if you've got 2 deeps and they're bursting at the seams, you could make more than 1 split off of it. And maybe 1 queen won't get mated and you only end up with an extra one, but you increase your chances of getting a good queen. And chances are you're going to find like a dozen queen cells in there, not 1 or 2.
Why? Like, was this intentional with the worker that the bees did this?
Yeah, the bees intended to
Yeah,
do it. The beekeeper
But
didn't.
why? Because they already have a queen bee.
Sure. So if they ran out of space, they got overcrowded.
Then they do that.
Yeah.
Naturally.
Yeah. This one I can't tell where it's at. A lot of times swarm cells are on the bottom of a frame, and emergency or supersedure cells will be kind of where this one is. An emergency would be something happened to the queen, like she got killed when you were looking at them the last time. Supersedure is the bees decide there's something wrong with the queen and they're going to replace her. So a lot of times they will do supersedure and emergency cells on the edge of the brood nest just because that's where the young larvae are.
So, but if the other queen bee is still in there and then this is happening, you want to get that one out? Because you don't want to, or what?
It depends.
Oh, they'll fix that.
That's what I'm
Yeah,
asking.
the bees will take care of it
Yeah.
if you don't intervene.
Okay.
So like in the case of a supersedure where they think there's something wrong with the old queen,
Mhm.
they'll replace her. And sometimes the new queen will kill her. Sometimes they'll both stay in the hive and lay for a while. But they need a new queen. Still, if you go in there and you see this is going on, you may want to make a split so that you've got 2 new queens in case one of them doesn't work out.
The bees are trying to tell you that they need to replace their queen.
Yeah.
for some reason. And it's your idea to figure out what they're trying to tell you.
See, you got a new job already. So here again, we've got queen cells. These aren't quite capped, I don't think. They're not quite as far along. If I found these and was going to make splits, I'd wait until they were capped before I moved them because they're really delicate right before they're capped.
Those are the larva's upside down inside that cell. And moving it and dislodge it from the place.
Yeah.
The egg, like you see in the cells, is in that cell upside down. It's hanging from the top of that pod.
Yep.
And if you shake it and move it, you risk dislodging it from that spot, and then it'll die on its own.
Yep. All right, whose turn is it? Your turn? Any guess?
I'd say,
It's not an easy one.
well, the larva looks healthy, so is it just in the process of capping?
No. It's a good observation. You normally won't see them in this stage. They'll be capped by the time they're that big. And the orientation, it's kind of what you'd expect for a developing pupa, but the shrunken head is and then when they go from this to this, where they're black and that shrunken head pointed up. Yeah. So that one is sac brood. Amy, what's that?
Normal. I don't see anything that
Normal
looks wrong to
depending.
me.
It's more queen cells.
Oh,
There's a larva down in there. And like Dave was saying, since that points down, that larva is kind of hanging up there. That's why they're fragile at certain points. There's a larva in that one. You can't see it in that one, but there's another one there. Adam, any idea?
I'm gonna say abnormal, because those all look fairly discolored to me.
Okay. So I think that's another trick of the light. That one is normal. And these are all shiny and white, but maybe they're a little bit out of focus, and that might be what
Okay,
tricked you. But no, that's pretty normal looking. Kyle?
That looks bad.
That is bad. And that's the American foul brood. And like that one, or especially this liquid that's accumulating on there is a pretty severe case. Probably any of these cells, you could stick the toothpick in and stir it up and pull it out, and you'll get like 1.5 inches, 2 inches of ropey, and it's going to look like this brown, nasty stuff. And I guess it's got a distinct smell. I don't have a real great sense of smell, and I've never come across American foul brood, but I've heard that it does have a very distinct smell. Rick?
Abnormal. It looks like the European foul brood.
Yep, actually it's American foul brood, and they look very similar, but you got a brown couple of them here that are sunk down to the bottom. You've got some perforated cappings, some sunken cappings. Yeah. Good job. Amy?
Are those raised ones on this side, or are they, I can't tell if they're raised or normal. I'll just say normal. Is it bad? Are those brood?
There's a few drone
Yeah,
right
drone,
there,
drone ones, yeah.
but for the most part, it's
Okay,
capped brood, pretty normal cell.
yeah, now I can see it, that you pointed those ones out.
Yeah, there's just a few drone brood in there, but no, that's a pretty normal one. It's got a couple of odd things, like there's some pretty good sized larvae there that aren't capped yet. Or I'm sorry, they're in the middle of capped brood, but they're younger.
Mhm.
So kind of weird, but not anything to be concerned about.
On the right side of this frame there, see the different colors there? You know what that is? So that's pollen that's stored away to help raise the young bees. So that's a good thing to see. You want to
Yep.
see that.
Yep, you want
And
to
that'll
see
be
pollen.
It'll be different places, but generally on an edge, so.
So is that capped or is it just? They just don't fill it all the way, but it stays.
Yeah, so they do not cap pollen. Most of the time, they'll fill those cells all the way up. These look like they're not completely full. So they either have been using it or didn't get it all the way filled up.
But there up in the top corner, there's some honey up there.
Yeah,
So
there's some
these
capped
worker
honey.
bees, as they're feeding the larva, they use that honey and the pollen, make a mixture to feed to the larva.
That's cool.
Your turn, Kyle.
Abnormal.
Abnormal, good. This one they actually call parasitic mite syndrome. There's a mite right there. You think there's another one there, and you can see a lot of these they're melted down, they misshapen, they don't look right, even though some of these are capped and look pretty normal. Anybody? Normal, but those are drone cells, which not normally where you'd find them, but there's just a few of them. So, I mean, they're going to lay some drones somewhere where they can.
And that is capped honey at the top of it.
Yes, this is capped honey. Yep. Yep. And then right in there is either nectar or maybe some eggs or some young larvae. I'm going to buzz through these a little bit quicker. So that one I think is a little bit obvious. See, that's really spotty. You were asking how spotty this is.
Right.
And some of them don't have cells, or I'm sorry, some of them don't have larvae in them. I think they've been cleaned out. So again, it's spotty because of a disease or a problem. Okay. Okay, so Dean, you want to get the lights? So we'll probably buzz through those again sometime, and you're more than welcome to look at them on your own. So now we're going to have Mark is going to come up, and Mark brought a whole bunch of stuff for you to check out that email. I'll let him tell you about himself because I actually just met him tonight. So let me get his slideshow going here.
So I'm Mark Graff. I raise bees over in Emerson, Nebraska. So my wife and I run about 100 hives through the summertime. I've been doing it 8-9 years now. So I've experienced a lot of different things. These slides are good to see, the ones you're seeing. But working with John and whatnot, and like to help new beekeepers coming. So what I'm going to talk about, we have a store over in Emerson. We were fortunate enough that the building next to ours was the old library, and they removed the library to where the building came for sale. So we bought it because it's right next door to us on Main Street. Town wanted us to put a store in, but then I also moved all my extraction equipment. My storage is all over there, so it's not in the basement of my house. I will tell you that's a wonderful thing if you can ever get to that point. But can't always do that. So I come to talk to you about you're new, you're going to start keeping bees. Maybe not this first year, because it's really tough to get honey their first year. I didn't. In fact, I had 2 hives, lost 1. So, but sooner or later, you're going to have honey and other things. What are you going to do with it? Because you might have a whole lot more honey than what you ever thought about having. Because on average, my hives make about a 5-gallon bucket of honey every year. That's a lot of honey. Each hive makes a 5-gallon bucket of honey. That's 60 pounds. Don't know if you got, so, but it's not a bad thing. You can give it away. You can go to the next slide.
Yeah.
So there's different honey products. We have raw honey. That's what this is. You see that all the time. And I didn't bring any raw honey. We do comb honey. You've been showing that because I see it sitting there. Dean, did you bring that in?
Yeah.
There's things to do with that. So raw honey, I think Dean's going to talk about extracting honey later on today. Am I correct?
Yes.
So that's how you get raw honey. Comb honey
you actually put in special frames so that the bees build up the comb and fill it with honey, and you cut it out. You don't have to extract. So you don't have the cost of extraction. But I tell you, it's the toughest thing to get bees to do to build that. I'll get 1 box of comb honey compared to 3 boxes of liquid honey, because of how much it takes effort for them to build wax and to get them to do it. They just don't like to do it. At least they don't for me. But the value of that 1 box is the same as the 3 boxes of raw honey. So it's something to look at. It's also a challenge. So if you want a challenge down the road, I won't say this first year, but down the road, it's something to think about. We do creamed honey. And I brought samples. And I brought little sticks. If you guys want to try some. Creamed honey is actually a crystallized raw honey. But it's a control crystal. It's really smooth. Oh, sorry.
No, that's right, I don't want.
So it's spreadable, it's not as messy. It's way better for Mark than what raw honey is, because I'm a little messy at
That's
times.
good.
It's easier to spoon into your coffee that way.
Yeah,
Ooh, yeah.
and we flavor part of it with dried fruit or cinnamon and different things. So different ones are different flavors you can try. I don't care. There are sample jars. We got sticks. You can use both ends of it, whatever.
But
So that's one thing you can do. It's a process to do that you'll get down the road, but it's a product that comes from bees. Infused honey. So we make a hot honey. And you can try that one too. It's a jalapeno infused honey. So it's spicy. It's got a whole different taste to it. Depends what you want. It works really good on barbecue, especially on chicken. We sell it for that. And a lot of people like it for those reasons. So that's honey products that we make. There's some others. Yeah, you can go to the next one. So then when you extract honey, a little strong?
good. It's really good. So good.
When you extract honey, you gotta cut the cappings off of the honey cells on the frames. So those cappings you can save and use because they're valuable. Don't throw them away, whatever you, don't throw them away. So we make a variety of things with them. We make lip balm and we make lotion. We make soap, wax melts. We make a lotion bar. So we make a bug balm, a bug bite balm. We make boot polish, and we make wood cutting board. We make other things too. And we make candles, and we gave you one. Those little tea light ones. So those you can learn to render the wax down and use it, or you can sell it and someone else will use it. The first time I extracted honey, I started making lip balm. Because I didn't have a lot of wax. It was beginning and it was trial and then I'm a true. I hate to say it, there's probably only about 50 cents in this lip balm. I sell them for $3. So you can make, you're not gonna get rich off of it, but I made them and gave them away for a long time, but I sell them now. We make a lot of them. We sell them all the time. So those are things that the wax can be used for. So then we make foods too. We make snacks. So I brought you some puffed corns. You guys can try.
That was really good.
And we make them, we make pecans. We make a honey ice cream, which is really good. I didn't bring that. We make a honey mustard that sells really well for us. So barbecue, we make fudge, we make all kinds of things. And then we make other things. I don't have lots left. Oh, so we also make beeswax wraps, wax figures, crayons, molding wax, And then we also make mead. You know what mead is? We brought some, I brought some for you to try. Mead's a wine made with honey. So instead of sugars to ferment, we ferment with honey. So because Mark gets bored and my wife has ideas, trust me, this is the way it works in our house. What, John?
Yep.
You guys all kind of look like the same deal at times.
Absolutely.
So we make that and we don't sell it, we just give it away, so. But it's different. I mean, if you want to try it, you're more than welcome to. I don't care whether you do or not. But I brought it along for people to try because it's something to do with honey. I mean, it's a product.
Value added. I mean,
It's a value added product. And that's what I'm talking about. What can you do with your honey afterwards to make money?
What was the beeswax wraps?
I didn't bring one of them. So they take cloth and you put beeswax, pine resin, jojoba oil, something else. And you melt this into the cloth and then it will replace saran wrap. You can kind of crinkle it up, warm it up to activate, to warm up the beeswax. And you can fold it over a bowl and it'll keep air. It won't be completely airtight or watertight, but you can cover bowls up, you can cover sandwiches up, you can put fruit in it and wrap it up, take it. And so it's a eco-friendly, non-plastic use of
you can
stuff.
reuse them?
Oh yeah, you can wash them with cold water, not hot water.
Cold water, okay.
Wash them with cold water, you can reuse them for years. You might have to put more stuff on them after so long if you use them a lot, but yeah, and we make them and sell them. So yeah, so then you get down to, I've got all this honey. I've given honey to everybody I know that I like. What do I do with the rest of it? You can sell it. I mean, it's valuable. I started out, the first time I had honey, I mean, yeah, we gave stuff away, but then I had a little yellow sign I bought from Dayton that said, local honey for sale. I put it in my front window, and in 30 days, I didn't have any more honey.
Wow.
I mean, and for 2 or 3 years, that's how I sold honey. I just put a sign out in the window when I had honey. It's gone.
Neat.
You can go to farmer's market, go back because I'll forget my other ones.
Oh, sorry.
Farmer market or vendor show. I think Iowa's about the same laws as Nebraska. Like, could be different. I'm used to Nebraska laws, but so you can sell honey face to face. Farmer's market, out of your front door, or at a vendor show with no licensing required, as long as you don't do anything to the honey except put it in a jar. So you can't sell infused honey. Creamed honey is iffy on each state. I don't know what Iowa's quite is. Nebraska, it's iffy on which county you're in.
No kidding.
Yeah, Douglas County gets a little fussy about it. But, but you can sell raw honey. Just extract it, strain it, put it in a jar. You can sell that. I mean, that's a nationwide law, pretty much. That's food code nationwide.
So what kind of money do you make off of a pound of honey then, if you're selling it?
I sell ours for $9 a pound. And then it varies according to size. That's pretty common in Nebraska. I don't know what you guys are getting here, but I think close to the same.
8 to 10, you know.
8 to
depends
10.
on the different areas where you're at, it's gonna be different.
It is.
Yeah.
You know, and so I never try to dictate what anybody else said, so we kind of try to be in the medium somewhere and hope to be. And we sell a lot of honey. That's our main product that we sell.
So what do you do when the people come and say, I can get it over at Walmart for $4?
I don't care. Go get it. Mine's better. I got first place at state fair shows to say mine's better than Walmart's is. So, so you can sell we do sell some through grocery stores, but I am licensed over in Nebraska. I have a food license over there, so I can do more things. So just be aware that some things do require you to be licensed.
So for your flavored creamed honeys, for instance, do you have to have a inspected kitchen in
Yeah.
Nebraska to do those in? So you have an inspected
I
kitchen?
have an
over
inspected kitchen.
Cool.
So that's why I'm licensed, is so I can do some of that stuff. And so I can sell through other markets that aren't face to face, so. You can without a license, you can wholesale to other
Retailers?
retailers.
Resellers?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Repackagers. I mean, there's Valhalla's in Lincoln. They're a big beekeeper down there. And they buy honey from small producers. And we sell honey to them because Sous Vide won't buy from them. I'm not big enough for them. But I can sell to Valhalla's. It's another place in Nebraska I can sell to. So you can sell buckets or drums of honey to them. I had a friend, well, he used to be my boss. He had about 300 hives. He still keeps bees. I bought some used honey drums from him. My wife looked at me and says, "What are we going to do with them?" I said, "We're going to put honey in them." Now, she thinks I'm a little crazy most of the time, but the first time we did that, then she kind of quit fussing at it. But it's easier to handle in bulk that way. But it also takes equipment to do that. Internet, Facebook, a lot of people sell honey that way. Most of them aren't licensed when they do it. They still consider that kind of face-to-face from what I know, so.
Face-to-face book.
Yeah. You know, each local area has some different rules and whatnot, but you can go to the next one. I left our card with you. We do have a website, you know, we've shipped to, not every state, but we've shipped to both coasts. It's kind of strange at times that we do that. I never know why people call or order from us, but all of a sudden you'll get someplace, New York City, they'll order. Find us. I mean, it's just weird, but.
So you have an actual walk-in store in Emerson,
We have
right?
an actual walk-in store.
What hours do you operate it?
Oh, we do Monday and Wednesday and Saturday mornings 9 to noon, Tuesday 3:30 to 5, and Thursdays 3:30 to 7. And then my number's on the door, so people call us other times too, because we're right next door. We run over. So
Okay.
my wife runs the store for us. She's retired and does that. I guess after this year, I'll probably be more. I'll retire then. I still work full time, so. And if you guys have questions or want to come see my hive or something, like I run about 7 apiaries right now, different spots over there. We're only about 25 minutes away. I mean, I'll take you out and show you. I don't care. I like to help people get started and show them things and share. I guess I like to share
Sure,
if I can.
yeah.
So
What kind of area do you have your hives in?
a lot of mine set on CRP or set aside ground of some sort. And I'm fortunate. You know where Hubbard Lake is, out south of Hubbard, Nebraska, Danish Alps, Pamper Lake. So I have hives out there. And they're set back up in some trees. You can't see them unless you know where you're going. And then we got some friends and some relatives that we set them out on their farm place. And most of those have not crops around them, not right next to them anyway. There's always crops around, but we've got some pretty good areas. Most of them are on windbreaks, just because I overwinter most of mine where they're at. Do one apple orchard down by Scribner for pollination purposes more than anything for him. You know, I've learned that if I can be around trees and some flowering stuff and maybe some alfalfa or clover, my hives do pretty well.
Is the, what they have access to with their nectar, do you call it pollen and nectar or what?
Yes,
Yeah.
Yep.
they're doing fine.
Okay, do they, does, that probably determines the flavor of the honey.
It
And
does.
then, is there something about the color? Because some honey is really dark and sometimes it's really light.
It does. So the hives we put down to pollinate apples. I've been told this before I started beekeeping, or right when I started. When I crack those hives open, it'll smell like an apple.
Really?
Yep, it's, I
Cool.
told my wife this and she kind of just looked at me and she does that a lot. But I pulled those boxes in and I cracked them open to extract and she could smell it clear across the room. I mean, and that honey has a whole different flavor, more floral, more fruity flavor, and it's a lighter honey. And then you get into some buckwheat honey, it'll be really dark. You know, sunflower honey has kind of a different flavor. Clover honey's pretty light. You get up north into canola, that's about a white honey. And it's really different. I don't have any, but I've seen it. Yeah, there's a lot of different colors of honey. I don't have the picture. I've got a picture that we took when we was traveling one time and was at a honey store. Imagine that, we don't look at honey stores anymore. And they had a whole shelf of just all different colors of honey.
Yeah, it's amazing the variety of color and flavor,
Yeah.
you know, based on what they're made out of.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and that's, you know, we market our honey as local honey. I mean, we sell quite a ways around, but still we market it mostly local to our area. People like ours. It always ends up with being good flavor, so. This area has excellent, I don't want to say this, has excellent habitat to raise good quality honey. I'll put it that way. Sure.
So for 100 hives, you say you're kind of running?
Yep.
What's your total that you get for honey for a season?
So we get, I mean, I'll peak at about 100 hives or just a little over, harvest probably 80 of those. We'll get about 4,000 pounds. Depends how many splits I have to make in the spring, how well I overwinter.
So if we were to start out and have 2 hives like it's recommended, we would get, like expect to eventually, from that you would get 5 or 10 pounds, or gallons.
You get like 100 pounds of honey.
Per hive?
No,
Oh,
between the
What'd you
two.
say?
Between the two?
But so what was
Gallons,
it, what was the measurement gallons? 5 gallons?
5 gallons per
Per
hive.
hive.
Which is about 60.
50 to 60, yeah, 5 gallon.
But I don't put 60 pounds in my buckets. That's like a pull them up out of the basin.
Yes.
Yeah.
I just know from, for me, if I extract, my extractor holds 2 supers. That's why I know this. And it'll spin out between 4 and 5 gallons of honey each time. That's, I can just count on it.
Okay.
That's how.
I'm
I
just
make
like
it.
imagining a bucket, like
Yeah.
a bucket that I use on the farm, like
Yeah.
that's it, right?
That's it.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
5 gallon
bucket.
bucket, just like you use on the farm.
Okay.
You're gonna get one of those off of every hive.
Get a food grade bucket though.
Yeah,
Yeah,
get a
yeah.
food grade bucket.
Don't use the one I used to feed
And
chickens.
that's something to mention, like you know, go to Hy-Vee or grocery store and get food grade buckets that they've used. If you get one that had dill pickles in it, your honey will taste like dill
Oh.
pickles.
Honey
So I
picks
just
up-
buy new plastic
Yeah.
food grade buckets.
Yeah, they're not that expensive. But other questions? I mean,
So when you make mead, how much do you make at a time typically?
either 1 gallon or 5 gallon.
When you do 5, how many pounds of honey?
Takes 3 pounds per gallon, so it takes 15 pounds.
Okay.
So it takes a little over a gallon of honey, gallon and a quart is what it takes.
And you don't heat yours, you just mix it and fix the yeast, is that?
Yeah. We do fruits, and one's a rhubarb down there. I like the rhubarb one. It's one of my favorites.
So the meat is running about $80 a gallon.
Probably. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it is.
Yeah, there's a
Well-
lot of honey that goes into it.
3 pounds is a quart. So for a gallon, we get $25 a quart for a 3-pound jar. So yeah, $25 of honey for a gallon.
Cool. All right, thank you.
You're welcome. I'll be around for a while.
All right. Okay, let's see. So everybody get through session 4 slides this week? Awesome. Okay. Good. So jump over to Zoom. So kind of like we did last week, I'll just start asking you questions. And so Dave, I got Chat GPT to write me a quiz off of my slides. And by the way, as we go through this, I added some slides on feeding pollen and protein patties. Because Chat GPT suggested I might want to add some on feeding those. It's like, oh yeah, I didn't have any of that in there. So I'm finding Chat GPT to be pretty useful. Yeah. Yeah. All right. I think that'll work. What does that say over there? Okay, so we'll start with you, Rick. So explain what a package of bees is.
It's like 3 pounds. Screen side usually has some syrup, sugar syrup to feed while they're shipping, and queen is in a container.
Little
that
cage.
It's either corked or marshmallowed.
Yep. And why did they put the queen in a cage and not just let her free?
Because she might be new to those bees, just to
Yep.
get acquainted, right?
Yep. So they literally put a funnel on top of this package. They put the queen in there in the cage. They put a funnel on that hole and they shake bees, and they've got it on a scale. And when it hits 3 pounds, they stop shaking bees and put the sugar can in there. So those bees don't know who that queen is. And until they get used to her, she's got to be protected from them. So Amy, what are some differences between a package and a nuke?
The package is just what you explained, and the nuke would be basically ready to go to transfer right into your hive that has everything on the, what do you call the pieces that go in there?
The
But it
frames?
has the brood and the bees and the queen, and they're basically like started for you, I guess.
Yeah.
Would be my understanding.
No,
And then you just transfer them into yours.
Yep. Yeah, so we call it a nuke. It's short for nucleus, which is basically the bare minimum or the center of a functioning hive. So yeah, you're right. It's got a queen, there are eggs, there's larvae, there's capped brood, there's adult bees, there's some honey, and there's some pollen. Hopefully, there's honey and some pollen. Sometimes one of the frames is a feeder frame for sugar syrup. Sometimes it's a frame of capped honey. Good. Adam, why is it important to have everything ready in advance before installing your first hive?
Because you want to, well, once you put your bees in there, they're going to start going to work, doing their thing.
Yep.
So you got to have it ready for them to do that.
Yep. And if you've never done this before and you're shaking 10,000 bees into a box, it's a little overwhelming. So you want to make sure you've got everything ready to go. Kyle, you want to explain the process of installing a package of bees into a hive?
Easiest way would probably take a couple frames out,
Bet.
spray them down so they're calm, take the queen out, put the queen in, basically pull the cork if need be. Then shake them in carefully.
As carefully as you can shake 10,000 bees.
Not get
Yeah.
them, not get them mad at you, and then close it up for a couple days. Come back and see if they let the queen out.
And as far as removing the cork, I recommend that you leave the cork in for 3 days. I don't think the queens these days are as high a quality and have the pheromones that they used to. I think it takes a little longer for the bees to get used to them. And I think I said in the text, you know, your gambling was $40. You know, if you have to buy a new queen, it's $40. So I always leave the cork in, come back after 3 days, and then remove the cork. And a lot of the cages these days don't have candy in them. Like my very first one, I pulled the cork out and there's the queen, and I panicked and I just put it in the hive and closed it up. It worked out, but yeah, so we want to get a good idea or get a good look at the cork in to make sure it's actually got some candy. Some people will tell you to take a marshmallow, and if it doesn't have a candy plug, you just take the cork out and put the marshmallow in there. I don't think it takes bees very long to eat through a marshmallow. I don't think I'd do it.
Smash a sugar cube in there.
Yeah, just, I mean, you can make the candy. It's just carob syrup and powdered sugar until it gets into like a Play-Doh consistency. It actually takes a long time to make, but you can do it.
So if you just put the queen in with the cork on for 3 days,
Mhm.
and then pull her out and see if they're mad at her or if they're nice, and then just let her go.
Yeah, you can do it that way. And in next session, there's a segment on requeening a hive, and it talks a little bit more about that. But it's something that you have to learn, and you don't requeen a hive all that often, so it is kind of hard to get a feel for. But if you take the cage out and you move your finger across, and you can move the bees off of the cage fairly easily, then that's a sign that they've accepted her. If you hear a Velcro sound when you move the bees off, and literally that's what it sounds like, the legs and the pinchers are coming off, they're trying to attack her. They haven't accepted her yet. They've got their heads down trying to feed her. That's a sign that they've accepted her. If they're not accepting her, their abdomens will actually be curled, and like the stinger is more pointed towards the screen. And then the other thing is when you do decide that they're accepting her, you can lay a frame on its side and pull the cork out and hopefully watch the queen go out onto the frame and watch the way the bees react to her. And if they get in a ball and start covering her up, I call it balling the queen. They're trying to sting her or heat her up and kill her, so they haven't accepted her. You can move them around and hopefully get her back into a cage and give it some more time. But yeah, it takes a little while to learn what some of the signs are, but yeah, you can do it. Yep. Let's see, I don't know where we're at. Okay. So what are some of the things to consider when you're timing wise when you're getting ready to install the package of bees?
About 50 degrees, ideally.
Yep.
And if you're worried about them being active, you do it closer to nighttime.
Yeah. I think that covers most of it. So yeah, make above 50 degrees. Some people will recommend you do it towards evening so that the sun goes down and they spend all night in there and they're less likely to leave the next day. Some people will also recommend that you put a queen excluder on the bottom of the hive so the queen can't get out. And I've done that with a package. You don't want to leave it on too long because the drones can't get out either, but that does work too. Or if you already have bees, you could put a frame of brood in there and install the package with the frame of brood, and they rarely will leave a frame of brood.
I thought the queen didn't leave that.
If they decide they don't like the home, they will. They call it absconding. So there are circumstances where the bees and the queen will leave other than swarming. If you catch a swarm of bees, put them in a new hive, it's not all that uncommon for them to abscond. So if you've got a frame of brood you can put in there when you catch a swarm, it's a lot more likely they'll stay if there's a frame of brood in there. But yeah, they will, queen will go with them in that circumstance. So Amy, how about some advantages or disadvantages of the different types of feeders?
Oh, God, that's kind of coming back to me. Was it, actually don't know,
That's okay.
but there's something like on the, put something on the top. I don't know, or something on the inside on the frame. I
You
don't,
getting
I'm
there?
sorry. I don't
Anybody
know.
else want to answer?
You didn't recommend the entrance feeder
Okay, yep,
I
let's see if
remember
I
that.
can get to it.
because it's so small, or other bees might rob it. Was that
So yeah, I don't like the entrance feeders. I like this type of hive top feeder pretty well. So the entrance feeder is where it's a mason jar. It sticks right in the entrance, and unless you put a piece of wood or something in there, robber bees can come up to the entrance, and they're literally 2 inches away from where the feed's coming out. You know, it's not a lot that the bees living in the hive can defend. And it's on the outside of the hive, and they leak, and the neighborhood bees will smell it. So if the feeder's in the hive, they might be able to smell it, but they won't be able to figure out how to get to it. And if they do figure out they need to go in the hive, the bees can defend it.
So do your bee, like, for you to have all those hives, they all just stay to their own hives? Like, they can't like intermingle and not integrate?
Pretty much they all stay to their own hives. There will be some bleed back and forth. The bees are pretty good about going back to their own hive. I'll tell
Yeah, I
you, if
guess
you
so.
put a different figure on the front of your hives, bees can recognize those figures. Doesn't matter what they are, color or.
Patterns,
Stick
colors,
Yeah,
figures.
I mean, I guess like
Yeah.
after I asked that, it makes sense that you had said like, because
But-
if those bees are gonna go eat from something or get their pollen, and then they come back to that hive, they're telling those bees where to go.
Where to go,
So they're
yeah.
obviously going back to the same hive.
Yep.
They'll go back to their queen because of her
Oh.
pheromone.
That'll depend on the time of the year too. Spring it'll start up fine, but you get into the fall when there isn't forage for them and everybody's hungry. The strong hive will go into a weaker hive and will rob it out.
So like the jar feeders, like you can take a mason jar and poke holes in it, put it on top of the frames, and then put a hive box around it. There's a picture somewhere coming up here of a big round plastic one, or people use plastic buckets. So those are a good way to feed. It's right on top of the frames. It's all enclosed. But if it's cold out and those leak, and they leak sugar syrup onto your ball of bees, they're going to get wet. And if it's cold enough, they freeze. That can kill them. So that's one disadvantage to that type. The in-hive feeders like this, you know, it contains a lot of the smell. It's hard for robber bees to find it. It's right above the brood nest, so sometimes that heat will warm it up. But you got to take the top cover off and the inner cover off to even check it. So it's, you know, a bit of a disadvantage. And all of the frame feeders and hive top feeders either need to have a float so the bees don't drown, or a ladder so that they can crawl out. And you'll still find dead bees in them. Let's see, Adam. So why do we feed sugar syrup after installing a nuke or a package?
Because they don't have enough, they didn't come with enough food to last themselves until they can start to produce
Yep.
food for themselves.
Right. Yep. They don't have enough food, and you're most likely you're giving them foundation, not wax frames, right?
Right.
So they got to draw those out. Kyle, describe, you get the package questions. Describe a method of getting the bees out of the package so that they enter the hive. You really already answered it.
Yeah, shaking them out, spraying them down so they're
And I think that,
usually, yeah, you probably do so they don't fly away. Is that part of it too? Why you spray them down so they're busy cleaning when you get them in before you put the lid on?
yeah, you spray them down so they don't fly as much. But when don't we spray them?
Cold.
If it's cold. And
It's really cold.
I would say under 50, 50 wouldn't be.
Would you
too bad.
recommend completely closing off the entrance when you first put them in so they don't, like for a day or two?
No, first,
Leave a small hole so they can.
yeah,
There you go.
something that's small that they can defend is a good idea. As soon as you start shaking bees and some of them get in the hive, other bees, you will go to the entrance and they'll start fanning. That you can see it. They stick their butt up in the air and they bend the stinger area down, and it exposes this gland called the Nasonov gland, and then they fan, and that gland gives out a scent, and it tells any other bees flying in the area, this is the entrance. So it's like some of the bees sense, okay, the queen's in this hive, here's the way in and out, there might be somebody out there that's lost, let's give them a beacon. And so, yeah, you wouldn't want to close up the entrance because they wouldn't be able to find that and draw the other bees in. Yep. All right, so what steps should you take if more and more bees return to the empty package after you install it? And I forgot to mention tonight, you can say pass, and then she has to answer.
I remember reading it, I just can't remember the whole.
What was I didn't even hear part, the end of the question. I guess I better pay attention better.
Yeah, now you gotta start paying more attention. I'll answer it. So what steps should you take if more bees return to the empty package after installation? So I recommend that you shake all the bees out that you can, but it's hard to get them all out.
Yeah.
So I will leave it by the entrance, and then they'll find their way in. But you want to keep an eye on it because some of the bees flying around might find the package instead. The queen cage has been hanging in the same spot for who knows how long, and there's some queen pheromone on the wood of that package. So if more bees start flying in, you want to put your bee suit back on and shake them out, and then go put that package in the garage or somewhere where they can't get to it. So I've heard of people coming out the next morning and most of the bees are back in the package, and the queen is in the cage in the hive. If all of them leave, then she could get chilled and die.
So you wouldn't want to just put another box on and leave the inside the hive?
I've heard of people recommending that you do that, and for the same reason, I don't think it's a good idea. Because, let's say that the queen doesn't have as much pheromone as she should. She's been in that package for sometimes could be a week, and she's stapled to your frame for a few hours. And so
they would kill her, possibly?
they wouldn't kill her in this situation because she's still in the cage and they can't get to her. But the queen pheromone is in that wooden package, and the cluster of bees might move back up there thinking she's there.
Yeah.
And then they won't feed her,
And then,
or it's cold out.
or it's cold and they abandon her. So yeah, you will see that recommended that you put the package on top. Some people even say just put it on top, don't even shake the bees out, and close it up and go away. And I don't think that's going to be as successful. I think there are lots of times when that'll fail. I think that comes from people, they're new and they don't want to shake all of these bees out because it's more traumatic for us than it is for the bees. So shake them out, get the package out of there. But that's a good question.
Remember, the bees crash land all the time.
All right. So Amy, why is it recommended that you do not use smoke when you're installing a package of bees?
But I do not
Which
remember.
I talked about it just a second ago.
Think of the Nasonov. Only device.
So if you use smoke, those bees that go to the entrance and fan that Nasonov gland to draw the others
so they
in,
won't be able to smell the scent.
right, the smoke will cover up that scent. Another reason is a package is really docile.
But yeah, you also, I saw in the video, you did do it though, when you were installing
That was
them.
the new.
That was the new.
Oh, so, yeah.
Yep.
Gotcha.
It
Good.
gets complicated.
It is
And it all
complicated.
depends, and you never do it right, and
Yeah, because
you got all these
honestly,
experts who know everything about it, and
I
and
didn't
they
even
all
put
do
that
it
together,
different.
because I was like,
Yeah.
I was reading it, it said one thing, and then in my mind, I watched
Yep.
the video, but they were two different, what I
Yep.
read and what I,
Yep.
okay, yeah, that makes sense.
I'm finding that that's one of the reasons why I keep wanting to go back to asking these questions, because now you won't forget that.
Yeah.
Now that and if I hadn't asked you the question in front of people, you might have glossed over it,
Yeah.
and you'd use smoke on your package and not on
True,
your
yeah.
nuke. So, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Adam, you got an easy one, I think. When should you remove, in my opinion, when should you remove the cork from the queen cage?
3 days.
3 days, yep. All right, so what's a nuke?
A ready-made micro hive, how's that?
Yeah. Yep.
Put a few frames in it and everything you need, or everything the bees need to sustain themselves.
Yep. Yep. Good. Okay. So, Rick, how should you transfer the frames from the nuke into your permanent hive or permanent location?
You should set the nuke either on top of the hive or where you're going to put the hive like a day before, so they get oriented to that spot.
Yep.
And then just when you are ready to do that, you smoke it and just transfer the frames.
Yep. Okay, so you brought it home one day, you set it on top of the hive you're going to put it in, or you take the box off and set it on the bottom board. What about the entrance? Because you closed it up to bring them home so they don't all fly away.
Oh, yeah, you pop that.
Pop the
tab
entrance open. Yep. Yep. And any reason why you wouldn't just install them when you got home?
Just want to have them orient themselves.
Yep, you can let them orient themselves and also settle down. In my experience, moving a hive and you need to open it after you've moved it, one of two things. They're either so freaked out, they're just as calm as can be, or they're the total opposite. They're really not happy with you. So I opt for waiting until I know they've calmed down.
So is that a thing with packages, or it really doesn't matter?
Are
they mad because you moved them all over?
I never heard anybody recommend letting a package settle down before you install it. I don't think it's a big deal. How about the other beekeepers? Any
Well,
opinion on that?
generally, when you get a package, all the bees are clustered around that feeder can anyway. If you carry it, move it, shake it around a little bit, they're still gonna be solidified around that can.
They tend to be packed in there pretty tight, so they don't. they're
I
not
get
as
why you're
anxious.
asking though, because you take a nuke and you put it in your vehicle and you go 60 miles an hour to your house and you get home and you're worried they're going to be stirred up.
They
You
are
put a
vicious.
package in your vehicle and go 60 miles an hour down the road. Aren't they going to be just the same stirred up? I don't think so,
It's about
but-
the same number of bees.
Little tiny.
The package is in a little box. And the nuke is about twice that size, probably,
Yeah.
so they have room to move.
You
They
think
got room to get riled up. There's a
The other
difference.
thing is, and you said this, you're gonna spray those bees down, package, before you move them, so they can't fly as much, so that
Yeah.
makes them calmer.
do they perhaps kind of have that swarm mentality?
Yes, that's
Since
where
they
I
don't
was
have
going next.
The rest of the frames and stuff there.
In the nuke, they would have that.
No, in the package, they are like a
The
swarm.
package is a disorganized ball anyway.
Yeah.
So,
But a nuke, it's got young larvae,
Right.
young baby bees to get defensive about, and a package does not. And a package is very docile and very much like a swarm.
They don't have anything to protect.
Yep.
when they're in a package.
you remember that first, you probably don't remember, but the first batch of bees that we got here that I bought, you guys were talking about, we deliver them over to the
The orchard,
orchard. You guys were talking about if you don't get there to pick them up, we're gonna let them fly. They've been cooped up on the truck now for a couple of days and it's warm out, so we're gonna let them fly. I'm freaking out over that. I'm going, wait a minute. I just paid $200 for these bees. You're gonna let them fly away? You know? And that's exactly what will happen. They won't fly away. They'll stay right with the individual nukes. They just.
They'll come
line them up.
back to that
Since we've
nuke.
done it, absolutely line them all up.
Yeah.
Out in the field and just let them go if it's gonna be inclement weather for a while.
Yep. And you open them up so that they don't overheat. And, they'll go out and they'll bring in nectar and pollen right back to the nuke box. And then the next morning you can come get them and take them home. All right. Amy, I think it's your turn. What are some advantages of starting beekeeping with a package compared to a nuke?
I think with the package, you would have less risk of mites or disease from like
Mhm.
the nukes having that since they're already established.
Yep.
I don't know what else.
No, you're on the right path. Less likelihood of getting diseases in,
Mhm.
like in the brood. You can get mites in a package, but at least it's not mites in the capped brood like you could with a nuke.
Mhm.
Yep, no, you're absolutely right.
Another
A
thing-
package is less expensive and usually a little earlier than a nuke. Sorry.
Another thing is when you do a package over a nuke, those bees are slower to grow, so you get used to your bees. When you're starting out, you don't get an explosion of bees that you're not ready for.
Like that full frame of cap.
Yeah.
So up there.
Yeah.
So you have more time to get used to the bees and not just be freaked out that now I got these bees that I don't know what to do with them.
Yep.
You can grow with them easier.
Yeah, so that's actually the next question. Adam. How does the initial population and growth differ between starting with a package and starting with a nuke?
Well, essentially, with the nuke, you've already started a few steps down the line.
You bet.
The package, it's gonna take, what is it, like 2 to 3 weeks before you start to get new bees.
New emerging bees, yep.
Whereas, again, with the nuke, you're a little ways down that path already.
Yep. So how many days is it for a bee to go from an egg to emerging, a worker bee?
21?
21, yep. So that package queen has got to start laying. And if you're putting them on foundation, there isn't even anything drawn out for her to lay in yet. So that might take a few days. So, it's a minimum of 21 days before you get any new bees. So 3 weeks. Bees live 4 to 6 weeks. So could be up to half of them die before you start seeing any new bees, any emerging bees. So this is in the text, but it's kind of hard to remember. But to put it back into perspective, a 3-pound package has around 10,000 bees. A 4-frame nuke has around 6,400 adult bees. So fewer adult bees, but it's also got around 14,000 eggs, larvae, and capped brood. So, you combine the two and you're looking at close to 20,000. And some of those adults are going to die as they're emerging, but all told, you're looking at about 20,000 population in a nuke, 10,000 in a package. And the nuke is not going to have a population decline. They're just going to move up. So Kyle, explain why packages may be preferred over nukes and vice versa in certain circumstances.
Yeah, the package starts slower, less chance of diseases coming in. Things take off a lot faster. And again, then they might bring some stuff with them you don't want.
Yep, and a nuke is going to, in our area anyway, a nuke is going to be available later, which gets you a little bit delayed.
So when you say later, around here, when did the flowerings start versus, you got a ballpark?
This year?
It
Yeah,
varies
like
a lot.
Next week? Oh,
Yeah.
So like, for instance, June 10th is about the time that the main nectar flow kicks in. That varies, but that I can give you fairly consistent. When do the apple trees bloom? Sometimes the middle of April, sometimes the middle of March, middle of May. That end, I think, varies quite a bit more. I think maybe you get more of a warning. It's like you can kind of tell, we're having like 50-degree days and 50-degree days. And it's like, pretty soon here the apple trees are probably going to bloom. Dandelions. I'm drawing a blank here. Dandelions, one of the first things we see bloom. Okay. Yeah, so you see the
Maple trees
dandelions.
and dandelions.
Which ones?
Maple trees.
Yeah, and the maple trees are
Willows.
really early. You'll have to start paying attention to the maple trees because you don't really see a bloom, but you see like the tips of the branches swell, and they're doing it now. My bees are bringing in maple pollen right now.
You'll look at the
Oh,
bees
wow.
at the front of your hive and you'll see pollen on their legs.
What exactly was your question? I don't know if we answered it. Sorry.
Yeah, I think you did when,
When will that
Flowering.
be every spring? Yeah, yeah.
so like, my question kind of stemmed from how long do you have to really keep feeding them before they will have anything to get,
Sure.
but you probably want to feed them until they've drawn out a decent amount of frames.
Yeah, so actually that's some of the next questions. So anybody know the answer? When do you start? How long do you feed them?
I kind of remember
So I think I recommend in there when you can tell the apple trees are about to bloom, that's a good time to feed them. If you get in a package or a nuke, you start feeding them right away. If you've got hives that are overwintered, but you've had some nice warm days like we have lately, and you're able to check them, if they're light, you feed them as soon as you find out that they're light. So yeah, if the apple trees are starting to bloom, that's about the time you can start feeding them sugar syrup because it's probably staying warm enough that the syrup will stay warm enough that they can use it. The syrup itself needs to be around 50 degrees for them to use it. And then in the case of a new package or a nuke, and you've got foundation, you probably want to feed them until they've drawn that foundation out. If it's an overwintered hive, you can feed them until like maybe when the apple trees are blooming, you can let off and then check them and see how they did. If they're still light, you can start feeding them again. Definitely, if you're putting on honey supers, you don't need to feed them at that point. You don't want to.
when you're feeding them, will they be trying to make honey out of that or not really?
It's honey-like substance.
They are storing it though.
Yes, they are storing it. Yeah, I mean, they'll eat some of it too, but yes, they do. They will store it and cap it, and it'll look like honey.
Hence the drinking gallons of it, as you were mentioning somewhere in there.
Yep.
Just storing a lot of that.
Well, and what's the rule of thumb? It takes about 6 pounds of honey or 6 pounds of sugar syrup to make a pound of wax. And they've got a lot of wax to draw out when you're just starting and you don't have drawn frames to give them, you've just got foundation. So yeah, it's going to take a lot of sugar syrup to draw out 20 frames. Yeah. Whose turn is it? Your turn? All right, so I talked about an easy way of making sugar syrup. Do you remember?
Just 1-to-1 and stir it.
Yep.
And then just keep going back to stir it until there's more.
Until it
sugar.
stops settling out in the bottom. Yep. Yep. And you'll see a lot of things online and books that recommend you boil the water and you add the sugar. And, one, it's easy to scorch it and that can hurt the bees. And two, it's really dangerous. I mean, hot, sticky liquid. And it's not necessary. I use a paint stirrer on a drill. So pull the trigger and stir it and walk away and do that 4, 6, 8 times, however long it takes. The thicker you try and mix it, like in the fall, you're trying to do 2 parts sugar to 1 part water. It'll take a little bit longer, but eventually it all dissolves and stays dissolved.
And the equal parts, that's a cup of sugar and a cup of water.
I do it by
I mean, if
weight.
you were-
Actually, I don't even weigh them out anymore. But if you were gonna measure it, it's by weight. So a pound of water, pound of sugar.
It's not a volume.
4-pound bag of sugar.
Half a gallon.
Yeah,
4 bags of water.
yeah. Gallon weighs 8 pounds, so a 4-pound bag of sugar and half a gallon. Yep. Yep. So Amy, describe a way of feeding bees during the colder months when sugar syrup can't be used.
I don't know, was that sugar like cubes or like a dry?
Yep. So you could pour dry sugar, like put newspaper down and pour dry sugar on top.
Mhm.
That's kind of an emergency or camp feed. You discovered that they're out of honey and you need to feed them in a hurry and it's cold.
Mhm. Can you do that during the warmer months too, or no?
You can. It's not going to be real effective.
Okay. It just sounds
Sometimes
easier.
yeah. Sometimes they will haul it out as debris.
Interesting.
And actually, some of the things I've seen where they talk about putting the dry sugar on top, they say even in the winter, put a few drops of water on it so that it gets a little liquidy and the bees figure out, oh, hey, we mix this with water, it's something we can eat. When I put, and I have to go through the slides and clarify, sugar bricks candy board, fondant. Most of them are the same, or different names for the same thing. You can buy some stuff that people have made where they say the sugar is inverted. But for the most part, you can just take sugar and mix just a little bit of water. I'm talking 5-pound bag of sugar and a half a cup of water until it's just a little bit, not really sticky, but it'll, if you squeeze it, it'll stay together. And you pack that into, getting involved. I've got quilt boxes that I put on top of the hives that I can put wood chips in. And the bottom of the quilt box is hardware cloth, screen. The bees can't get through it. I poke some holes in it to where the bees actually can get through it. And I put that sugar with a little bit of water in that and pack it down and let it dry. So it ends up being like a sugar cube. It's right above the frames. It's got holes in it so the bees, when they need to, can come up and they can eat that sugar cube. So another way of doing it is to make a feeding shim and just pack it full of sugar, and then you have some kind of mesh on the bottom so you can set that on top of a hive and you put it on there in the fall. So
Come out this weekend.
So if you had the foresight or you were prepared, you put them on there in the fall. If you discover in March the bees are going to starve, you can just put dry sugar on it. Or, excuse me, you can put pieces of those sugar bricks or fondants on there too. It doesn't have to be one, doesn't have to cover the whole top of the box. Yeah, you can put whatever you have in there. I moved some around this weekend. That had one hive that they'd eaten about half of it. And I had some old ones that I just broke up and filled in the empty spaces.
I have what I feel is like a really dumb question.
Nothing, not a dumb question.
Can't you just go to the store and buy a bottle of honey, put it in there?
Yes, you can. The American foul brood disease can be in the honey.
Okay.
I don't know if it's something to worry about, but yeah, you could do that. It's going to be more expensive
Right,
than feeding
right.
sugar.
Where are you gonna put the honey?
I don't know.
Right. Because if you pour it on top of the hive or on top of the frames, it's just gonna run down
Oh, okay, okay, all right,
instead of being stored in the cells.
okay.
You could pour it in like the hive top feeder or frame feeder. The one time that I put a jar partially full of honey in the top of a hive, so I had another feeder in there, and there's room, and I have this half full jar of honey that I needed to get rid of it. It was my own honey.
Right, I mean,
I came back and that jar was full of dead bees. They got stuck. And
So you'd have to dilute it, basically.
yeah, I think you probably
Consistency of
have to
water.
dilute
But
it.
that's the wrong thing to do. You can't do that. Well, maybe that's the right thing to do. Which one do you use?
It's probably going to ferment if you dilute it and they don't use it right away. So yeah, it can be done, but it's got its
I mean, like,
drawbacks.
if you, you harvested your honey, you know, it's winter time, you've still got some left, they need it. It sounds like it's a useful, or, you know, how do you make it usable is really the issue as opposed to
Yeah,
what
yeah.
you're giving it.
How do you make it usable and safe? And something you can do when you harvest your honey in the fall, you don't have to extract it all. If it's capped, it's going to keep, and it will keep in that frame. So there's a possibility it could have wax moth eggs in it, in the wax and in the wood. So you can take the frames, you can put them in your deep freeze. I would recommend you freeze them for at least 3 days. But after that, you can take them out of the deep freeze and you can keep them. And come spring, if the bees need them, you can give those frames of honey back to the bees. If they don't need them, then you can eat it yourself.
Right.
You could do honeycomb, or you could extract it at that point. Some beekeepers, that's their mode of operation, is to save some frames of honey to give to the hives in the spring if they
You're
need to.
much better off working towards that with your winter preparations, where we're talking about springtime, getting things started. You know, it's a different season, different things you're gonna have to do in the winter so that the bees will survive. We're feeding a different ratio of sugar syrup, try to get it all into their hives and into their frames. So it's just like honey, if you don't have quite enough, you know,
Okay.
So, Adam, I think it's your turn. What are some of the benefits of feeding sugar syrup in the spring?
Well, you get more bang for your buck, I suppose. You've given them that high concentrated amount.
Okay.
Usefulness,
Sure.
it's able to be used.
Yep, okay.
It's easy to do, easy to make, cheap.
Yep, okay. Some other things to think about is it simulates a nectar flow. And during a nectar flow, the queen is going to start laying more eggs. And you want that in the spring because we want them to build up so they're at a high population when the real nectar flow kicks in. So by feeding them, the queen's going to start laying more eggs. They're going to raise more brood. They're going to draw out more frames. This isn't in the text, and I should probably make sure it's in there. If you put foundation in a hive, bees will not draw out foundation if there's not some kind of nectar flow on. So if you put it in there and think, oh, they'll just draw it out, if there's not nectar coming in, they'll just ignore it. But if you put it on there and you feed them sugar syrup, they'll start drawing it out. So that's one of the other advantages, is it causes them to draw out foundation. Something else, if you're introducing a new queen, we talked about that when she's in the cage, you feed them sugar syrup at that point, they are more likely to accept the new queen. So that helps. So Kyle, why is it cautioned against feeding sugar syrup during an early warm spell like in February or March?
They might start laying eggs and raising brood, and then
Yep.
you don't want that yet.
Same thing, it stimulates brood rearing. So the bees think there's nectar coming in, we're going to lay a whole bunch of brood, and then because you fed them sugar syrup, there's more brood than there normally would be, and it gets cold, and they have to stay out over that brood to keep it warm, and the whole hive can freeze and die because of that. Phil Westra, who was here last week, was into his bunch of his nukes first part of February, and he found like 50% of them dead with big brood areas. And in this case, it's not because he fed them, but it's the same reason that they died. They had big brood areas, and when we had that cold snap, they couldn't cover it, and they died. We don't really know why they had such big brood areas. It wasn't that warm, so that's a mystery.
So is that a thing in the fall? If you got too much brood when it gets cold, to take some out?
No, they somehow in the fall they
handle it.
they find that equilibrium. Yeah, they wind down in the fall. Although, if we went, let's say we had 60-degree weather in the fall and all of a sudden it went below freezing, that would happen or could happen. Yeah, but it's not as likely. It doesn't happen as often. So what are, let's see. Yeah, we already talked about that one. Why is open feeding not recommended?
You can attract other things that might do harm to the hive, or
So I don't know if I explained it real well in text, but open feeding would be like we just put a feeder out in the middle of all the hives or across the yard from the hives, and yeah, any bees could get there, or ants or wasps or whatever. But the main reason why it's not a good idea is when that open source of sugar syrup runs out, all of the bees that were coming there come back, and there's nothing there, and they start looking in other places. And if you're feeding close to your hives, all of these bees will find your hives, and it can trigger robbing. Robbing is pretty hard to get stopped once it gets started, so you want to avoid it. Not sure if this was in the text yet, because I just added it, but in the spring and the fall, do we feed the same kind of patties? If you didn't read it, not a problem. Nope. So I don't feed pollen patties or protein patties, so some of the experienced beekeepers will have to double check what I came up with this week. In the spring, we feed pollen or protein patties. And in the fall, we feed winter patties, which have less protein. Am I getting that information right? Okay. The important thing I wanted to get across to you guys is the pollen patties or the patties that you feed the bees are not the same in the spring and the fall. And if you feed them the spring ones in the fall, the protein content in them, it's hard for the bees to digest. And if they get cooped up and can't go out to poop, it can set them into winter in a bad way.
Let's ask Mark, do you feed patties at all?
No.
At no time?
I've tried it a few times in the spring. I've never tried it in the fall. For the most part, especially being around trees, my bees won't eat them.
They don't eat them, so they leave them in
Yeah, I
there.
ignore them, so.
And so for you guys, the pollen patties are usually about that thick, and there's like wax paper on both sides, and you can peel wax paper off of one side, or sometimes just leave them both on. You put them right on top of the frames, put the inner cover on, and they're right in the hive.
The thing you need to be aware of on the patty issue for new beekeepers, especially around here, is you have to be aware of what is happening out in the forage areas. If there suddenly becomes a dearth in the middle of the summer, usually around here, if you just have one or two hives, you probably want to feed them because that population is fairly fragile. And like Mark said, his hives are located in ideal conditions for the most part. Well, mine are not in an ideal situation, so.
Yeah, and the University of Florida has done some studies at the Iowa honey producers meeting this year. Jamie Ellis was talking about that, and they've pretty much found that pollen patties only work when there's not available pollen outside of the hive. And it's kind of hard to tell when you're in that situation. So,
Well, what I find is that if there's natural stuff out there, they won't eat patties.
Yeah.
They'll prefer the natural intake.
yeah, and so you can err on the side of caution and put them on. They're not terribly expensive. And then sometimes, like in the spring, when it's cold out, it might be too cold for them to go out and bring in pollen, but they will work the pollen patty right on top of the frame. So there are times when
You just have to be aware, especially that's where your mentor or your other beekeeper contacts come in, is if I've got a question like that, I'm either gonna call John or Dean, right? You know, we're gonna talk about this, what's going on. There is a dramatic difference between here and Sioux Center.
Sure.
And even Dean's operation is different than mine, and mine is at Hinton. Between those two places, there is a difference in the timing of the forage and the blooms and all of that stuff. All of a sudden, and it doesn't, I'm not saying one happens before the other. Sometimes the progression happens up there before it happens down here. I would say we are 2 weeks, I've always said 2 weeks behind what happens in Sioux Center. Talk to beekeepers at the club up there. They're feeding or they're putting on patties or whatever. They're doing it 2 weeks before we need to do it down here. They'll say, oh, the flowers are starting to bloom. The maple trees are blooming. Looking outside and there's still snow on the ground and no blooms happening here.
So these are the entrance feeders or the border feeders that I was saying I don't recommend. So and then there's the frame feeder. It replaces one of the frames, and those usually have a folded piece of screen so the bees can crawl up the screen. Amy, I think it's your turn. So what precautions should you take when you're selecting hive locations, or what should you think about when you're going to put your hives in, like exposure and pesticides and all of those nasty things?
I mean, I guess just that, like, no, probably away from pesticides clearly. That there's a water source maybe close, that there's food source available close to them within a few, I don't know,
Couple
miles.
miles, or a mile if
Mile,
possible, but
yeah.
yeah.
Yep. What else? The location, basically. I don't know.
So,
What else?
yeah, you hit pretty much everything except for like natural barriers, like a
Okay.
hedge or a tree or a building.
Yeah, or for like the winter, or all the time.
Well, for winter and for pesticides.
Yeah,
So like in the
Yeah.
winter, if there's a windbreak,
yeah,
because the wind blowing across the hive takes a lot of heat out. So yeah, in the wintertime, a windbreak. But that same windbreak can also prevent your neighbor's spray from drifting right into the hives.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I was thinking like in town for that, but I suppose even in the country from the farmer spraying the fields.
Yep.
Taller things would protect it.
Yeah.
The hive.
And, out in the country, yeah, you've got cornfields and beet fields and things that are
Mhm.
sprayed.
Mhm.
In town, you've got people that are spraying things on their lawns.
Yeah.
So yeah, either location, if you can put them up alongside of a building, or if there's a row of bushes or trees or something between you and the neighbor, all of those things can help. And I mentioned it before, you're just kind of trying to put the odds in your favor. Every little thing helps a little bit, some things more than others, but yeah, you're just trying to stack the odds in your advantage. So Adam, what can you do to provide water sources for the bees?
Like an artificial water source?
Yeah. Yep.
Would a bird feeder work?
You bet. Bird feeder works. Rubbermaid tote with a big rock in it. That's what I use. Corks floating in a 5-gallon bucket, or a board sticking out of a 5-gallon bucket that you refill often. Like if you got your bees a ways away from water source, you can carry water out to them. But yeah, just pretty much anything. And then keep it full so that they don't go find the neighbor's swimming pool.
Would it need to be like, would the river count as a water source? I mean, are they
Yeah.
going to go near moving water like that?
So, yeah, I mean, like, not that there'd be a rapids around here, but they wouldn't, I think they would avoid something like that. But a creek, a puddle, a dam, a
On
pond,
the low
you bet.
backwaters or something where it's shallow, if it's going across rocks
Yep.
and stuff.
Something where the water's got a little bit of a smell to it, it's easier for them to find and attract other bees to. So like a puddle that stays pretty consistently full, that's something you'll find them at. They're in my bird bath all the time. Yeah, it works pretty good because they'll land on the outside of the bird bath and walk down. It's got a gradual slope. So yeah, bird baths work good. Yeah. So Kyle, how about morning sun or sunlight or exposure? What are some things to consider there?
This morning sun was nice because it gets them supposedly up and active, and more sun, supposedly less mites. They,
Small hive beetle.
okay.
Yep, but you're on the right track. Yeah, the small hive beetles tend to avoid the ones that are in more sun.
And around here, maybe not, maybe some afternoon shade so they don't get cooked in the evening.
Yep. I like afternoon shade because I think it gets pretty hot in August and it's a lot of work for them to keep it cool. Yep. And how about, Rick, what can you do to protect them from potential vandalism?
Just keep them mostly out of sight from the public as best you can.
Yep. Maybe trail cams or security cams. Yep. Okay. All right. Actually, that's all of the questions that I've got for you guys. There's the other type of in-hive feeder that I used one of these for a while and really liked it. And then this year last fall, I went to use it and I put it on the hive and I walked away and I hear glug, glug. And I go back and the valve or whatever, and it wasn't working anymore, and it was just running through the hive. So that's something to be careful of. And then plastic buckets with a hole in the lid. A lot of times they'll put them just like this, right on top of the frames. So the pollen patty stuff I added pretty recently. You may not have seen it, but that's something to consider. And they're in the Dayton's book. Dayton's sells them.
Those are actually made out of pollen. something else?
Some of them are real pollen. Most of them are a pollen substitute. So you guys know what's in them? Soy flour, something like that.
I
Some
can't tell you.
There's different mixtures.
different mixtures. Yeah.
It's one of those things that these bee supply companies have been working on, so it's not like this is the first time we'll put this stuff together. They make up their recipes and I think that's how it works.
One other cheap feeder for syrup,
Mm-hmm.
you can take a gallon Ziploc bag, fill it with syrup, and then put little pinholes in the top of it, and the bees will feed out of that.
Where do you put that?
Lay it right on top of the frames.
I've heard of that. With
I've done it, it works.
can't remember what they call that. Baggy feeder. Yeah. Anything that we didn't cover that anybody was confused on or had questions about? Had somebody ask me today, "Where's that picture at?" It's like, I stole it off of the internet, and for some reason I didn't give them copyright credit. I'm going to have to fix that. Not this much water, right? But that's something you may not think about. I'm going to put the hives over here by the barn or by the chicken coop or wherever. And then we've had this happen to some beekeepers up around Sioux Center. All of a sudden, spring comes and we have a flood, and their beehives float away. You just, you wouldn't think about it. Or like mine, the picture I showed you with mine are in the windbreak, and come January 1st, they're under 10 feet of snow. So you want to consider those things. And like a flood, you might have some warning, you might be able to move them. But if you don't have to, that'd be a lot nicer. Okay, so if you don't have any questions, Dean has got some stuff out in the atrium. Dave, would you take that computer out to the atrium? And I'm gonna mess with my phone over here.
Oh, good read.
I'm gonna unmute it too. Okay, you should be good. Thank you. Hey, Dave. Dave. I think I need to turn the Wi-Fi on it. I can get it. Ooh, we just got booted. Should have thought of that. Says it's connecting.
It is.
You want to unmute it? Start video on it too. You'd just be able to mute. Start video. Okay, you're good.
But it's good audio?
I think so. I can't. Go ahead.
Oh, it's unmuted here. It's
Yep, go ahead.
slow.
It's like this. So the thing with this is you would put this in between that honey super and the bee box. So the
Like
bees,
after you take this off?
take that off,
Yeah.
put this on, the bees will go down through this little maze, and then they can't get back up into your honey boxes too well. It doesn't necessarily get all of them out, but you might get a lot of them out. And here's another one that I made where the bees will go down where the brood is and stuff, crawl through those little cones, and they won't get back into your honey box, which entails lifting your boxes off, putting those on, wait a day or two, you know, and I mentioned bee brush, just to brush the bees off. I found that I have this little blower that I would use. So I would just hold the frame in front of the blow the bees off like that and set it aside. There's a thing like this called a fume board, which there's some different chemicals that you can put on the felt. That's real stinky. Put a little bit of that on there. Put this on top of your hive when it's hot and warm. And the bees, that will drive the bees down out of that box within a few minutes or so. So there's different ways to.
So less bees and possibly no bees that you'd have to shake out.
Right.
Or get off.
And some people use that and take all their boxes off at once. There's different ways to do it, but you're gonna have to get your bees away from your honey frames. So once that's done, and you found a place where you're gonna extract your honey, this is my setup that I have. So take this frame without the bag on it. I have this set up down in my basement. So then you take a knife like this, they make heated knives and stuff like that. You cut the top of that wax capping off of both sides. These frames, and then it goes in here. All the juicy wax falls into this tub and the honey's dripping down in there, so you can recover all of that too. And then you put these frames in there. The first time I did it, I had a hand crank one. So then you sit and crank it until the honey comes out of the frames. And after that first year of hand cranking, I thought if I'm gonna do this very long, I'm gonna invest in something like this. And then I was able to get a 20 frame extractor from a guy I worked with when he got out of his bees. So like you said, you can do 2 boxes. So that's what I do. I can put 2 honey boxes in a 20 frame extractor. 10, 15 minutes later, the honey runs out, comes out this bee here, my bucket. There's a little screen like that to catch any of the wax that falls off the frames or any bee legs or wings that might still be on there. And that's it. And you get 50 pounds of honey in there. One of the things you want to do is to check the moisture of the honey, which if the bees put it in there and put that wax cap on top, you know it's going to be good because the bees can tell what moisture content, which is about 17, 18%. And once that's all capped, you're safe to go. But when you're getting done to extract your honey and the spring's only half capped and some of it's not capped, you're going to want to check it and stuff, which this is a refractometer. You look through it and you can see what the moisture content is with your honey. So that's kind of how that stuff works. Here's some wax that I have a top bar hive, which has these bars across it instead of the frames. And I had bees in there a couple of years ago, so that's what the comb is like.
Soft.
But this piece right there, that has honey in it. So that was in this one hive. So any questions on that? And getting started, I do provide this for people to use at my place, you know, if you get started and want to give it a try and see how it works before you spend a lot of money on things. This was like $900 for an extractor like that. Baumgart's Fleet Farm has a little 2-frame hand crank one for a couple $100 you could get. So it all depends on what you want to use. Any other thoughts or questions or anything?
So once you have it in the buckets, probably depending on the moisture content, you can just kind of store it.
My wife puts it in her jars like this.
But you can leave it in the buckets if you would want to.
It will crystallize after a time.
Okay.
So like the first month or so, you're probably fine, but if you have it sitting in your closet or your basement or something for, you know, we generally take ours off in July and into August. And if you have it at Thanksgiving, Christmas time, it might crystallize. And then what do you do with this bucket of hard honey?
Yeah.
I got a box with a light bulb in it that's insulated, put it in there, and after about 3-4 days, it's all liquid again.
Yeah, I was interested in seeing this. I had no idea. But I've been wondering.
So if you look at the comb that's being brought over here. So this one is capped. Pass that down and get a good look for it. And then you take that capping knife and basically slice that outer layer off the cap. And what you end up with looks almost exactly like that. I mean, it's in the wooden frame, but you see how those are all open, except for they've got honey. And like, you know, you put them in that, and you notice how the ears on the frames go to the outside. So the bottom of the frame is to the inside, the ears of the frame are to the outside. When they build these cells, they are not straight up and down, and you can see that when you look at the edge. So
they're kind of pointed at an angle.
yeah, they're kind of V-shaped, and that by putting them in the extractor with that top bar on the outside, that V is easier for the honey to come out the top of the frames. If you put them the other way around, which they're not made to go that way, but if you put them the other way around, you'd end up with some honey stuck in the bottom of the leaves.
It makes sense. They put it in a slope so they can just fill it and just run out.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because when it's nectar, it's real watery and it would run out. Whereas honey, you know, it's going to stick in there. But yeah, it starts out as nectar. They dehydrate it essentially, add the enzymes to it and make honey.
So what are you gonna do with all the wax that you cut off these frames in here? Well, this has a little gate on it too, so all the honey that's down in the bottom of this tank like that. I'll set this kind of at an angle running into my bucket, so all the honey comes out after a couple. But then I'll take this wax and put it in a tub. I got several of these long plastic tubs, like you can store things under your bed and stuff, you know, they're about so long and kind of shallow. So I'll put those wax cappings in those, set them outside on my picnic table. And the bees come to it and suck all the honey out of all this comb, so it ends up feeling like this, it's dry. And then I have a solar melter that it's heated by the sun and the wax melts down and it's filtered through some, I usually have like paper towels or something like that for the wax to melt down through it and goes into a little pan. And I use it to make candles and sell the wax and things like that.
I was very appreciative to hear about all the stuff you can do with it, because quite honestly, I'm just kind of interested in doing it to do it, you know. Honestly, I'm not really a honey guy to begin with, but like, you know, I recognize that if I actually do this, I'm gonna produce a lot more honey than I could ever need, and, you know. It's nice to hear that there's places, things that you can do with it, you know.
There's a lot of things you do with it that add value. And like you said, not everybody eats a lot of honey.
Yeah.
And that's why I say, what are you gonna do with this honey? It might not be this year, but it'll get to that point sometime.
Right.
And if you have a partner to work with, my wife deals with the honey, I do the bees. I hate sitting at a farmer's market for 4 hours when she's busy or gone someplace and, you know, take all the stuff in there to sell and sit there waiting for 2-3 people to buy stuff. We did a presentation here last Monday for the Sioux City Garden Club, which I had this stuff set out here, talked to people, answered their questions, and she had all of her honey and stuff, wax stuff in there. She sold like $200 worth of honey and stuff. In the hour that we were here, instead of sitting outside for 4 hours someplace, so that was a plus for us.
So you guys notice a different color in parts of that? So anybody want to venture a guess what's going on there? Why?
Brood and honey.
Yep.
Maybe.
Yep, so they raise brood in the darker areas.
Was this just not filled?
Probably. There was 2 frames on these sticks. This hive, it sits like this with a kind of an angled box. So it's filled with these bars on top and the bees make wax on there. There was like 2 of them that were real dark right towards the front. These were back farther. The thing with this is, see how this is crooked? They would build that wax crooked instead of following the sticks like they're supposed to,
Why?
because they wanted to. It's messing with me. So that was another one of those experimental things to do. And I think I put a swarm that I caught in this hive, which it worked okay. But then it's a whole different situation of manipulation and dealing with it rather than with the frames that you can pull out of the box.
So it looks like they followed your guide in the center, but then out at the outer edges,
Right.
they curved it. And that's what I found in top bar hives too.
And pretty soon you got 2-3
Two or
of the
three stuck
frames
together.
stuck together and you're trying to pull one out to inspect or look and see if your queen's laying in there. But I've seen a YouTube video where, you know, how thick this honey is. They just build it out about that thick full of honey. And you could use it for selling as comb honey or using it too.
You can get them to stay straighter on the top bar frames if you've got one frame already drawn out that's straight and you put it in between there, or every so often you put a Langstroth frame with foundation so they can't curve it. It's kind of a gradual process. You can also cut it loose and straighten it back out, and sometimes they'll attach it again. But that's one of the, you know, there's a trade-off. There's some good things about a top bar and there's some things that are more work. Same way with me running all 8-frame mediums, you know, there's some good things, there's some bad things. I have to move more boxes and move more frames to do a full inspection, things like that. That's all I have. That's all you got, all right. So did everybody get to watch the videos on installing the package and installing the nukes? Okay. I've seen some YouTube videos when they're spraying the bees down, man, they really spray them. I don't spray them all that much, especially if it's cold out, but if it's warm enough, I guess there's no disadvantage to spraying them. And then one thing that I didn't talk about, but that video does, he sprays them and then he thumps them down on the ground, knocks all the bees in the bottom of the package, and then he pulls the syrup can out. So that's, you know, a way to get them away from that entrance. You can pull the can out, get the queen out of there. And then a board or a piece of cardboard or something, you can slip right over the top of that hole where the bees come back up out of it. Works pretty good. On the nuke, if it was kind of cold out, but you really still wanted to get the frames installed in the new hive, you could move 2 frames at a time. If you're got really, really big hands like Todd Osterberg says, you just move 4 or 5 at a time. You could do the whole thing, make sure you got room where you're going and just pick them all up, put them in there, button it up, and knock the bees out of the nuke box into your new hive. You could literally do that in less than 5 minutes if you for some reason needed to. It's a little bit chilly. Other questions or anything that you're curious on? Has anybody bought equipment yet? Yeah, would you end up getting 10-frame deeps or 8 mediums? 8-frame mediums, okay. What'd you go with for frames and foundation?
Plastic on some of them, and then I got still cummings and natural. Different sizes.
Okay, different cell sizes on the foundation itself. Okay, so have you guys come across the small cell foundation and the not small cell? Okay, so most of the foundation is 5.4 millimeters. That's the measurement from cell wall to cell wall. But there's a school of thought out there, or more than that. If bees are given their own choice, like this, and no foundation, they will draw out something smaller than 5.4. Most people will say they'll draw out 4.9 millimeter. So that leads to, there was a whole natural beekeeping. People think that it helps with the mites, that the mites don't reproduce as quickly in the small cell. There's not a whole lot of evidence out there proving that it helps with mites. But then some of the studies that I've seen, I don't think are designed really well. But some people think that it's more natural and it helps the bees fight the mites. There's no arguing that it's more natural. If you let them, they will draw something closer to 4.9 than the 5.4. So, and I don't, if you buy the smaller foundation, I don't really see any drawback. As a queen out of a package or queen out of a nuke, they will lay it. I've done it. I use small cell foundation. They take a little more spinning to extract them. The honey seems to stay in them a little better than 5.4 millimeter. But yeah. Anybody else bought equipment yet? Looked at? Kind of on the side?
Yeah, just looking at protective clothing first.
Okay. So does David's have the ventilated bee suits? Anybody see
On their website.
Okay. Yeah. If you get hot, easy, like I do, ventilated full suit is a pretty good choice. Yeah.
So with package bees, the bees you get are going to act different perhaps than what the queen lays, because there probably could possibly be completely different strain.
Yes,
Set of
absolutely. So
other thing.
the bees that are in that package did not come from that queen. So yeah, we talk about the population declining and then 3 weeks after the queen starts laying, we've got new bees emerging. That's when you start seeing the bees from her. And that's when like your current queen's personality might start to show. Yeah. I think I've heard people say they get packages sometimes and the bees are, you know, they're coming from Texas and they think they're Africanized because they're aggressive, and then the new queen's bees take over and that aggressiveness goes away. I've heard people say that. Never had it happen.
So when you get a package, the bees, like I understand that those bees are not from that queen, but they're still not coming from the same place.
They're not, yeah. So the queen producers or the package producers go through a whole bunch of their hives and make sure that there's no queen, and they start shaking bees together. And like I said before, they literally put a funnel on top of that package and put the whole thing on a scale,
Mhm.
and then they're shaking these combined bees into it. Yeah.
And they're filling 100 of those packages at a time,
Mhm.
just out of random hives in the apiary.
Mhm.
And you get, I guess it depends on where they're shaking them from, how old the bees in the package are.
Mhm.
So if they just go through a whole bunch of honey supers, most likely those are older bees. If they go through the whole hive, you know, you're gonna get a broader diversity of ages. And if they just went through the brood nest, ship them to be younger bees. So it's possible that, you know, package producer is trying to save himself some money, resources, and would just shake as old bees as he could into them. So you might be getting some older bees in the package too. Probably it's more likely that they just everything they can to make up these packages because they're doing it in a hurry, and I doubt that they're intentionally putting old bees in there.
Mhm.
You will get, depending on who you get your nukes from, you will get old comb in the nukes. It's just a good way for the beekeeper to get rid of the old frames, and you know, sometimes those are the brood frames he's got available. And then you might also get a brand new frame that puts in there that he has them draw out. So you might get a couple really ugly frames in your nuke and a couple of pretty new ones. Well, go back in, sit down, and go home, or whatever you guys want to do. Or we could try some meat.
Yeah, I got a sample of meat, I think.
It's what it's served for.
Yeah, let's break out the meat.
I was thinking about it, yeah.
I'm gonna be going to some of my hives this weekend, so if any days are
Yeah.
interested in coming out, well, Sunday, 1 o'clock.
Mhm.
Amy's coming out. You guys interested in?
I would love to, but this particular weekend is not a good weekend for me.
Okay.
Some time, absolutely.
Usually, this doesn't happen till like in April or so, but when you got 60-degree weather in February, and you guys are here, I'm
That's
offering
good.
you.
That feels strong to me.